Montana Territory, early October, 1882. The wind blew sharp off the crazy mountains, slicing through the valley like it meant to take something with it. Just ahead of the storm, a woman rode into the flat basin where the grass browned early and the sky seemed too big for any one soul to carry alone. Her hands were raw from the rains, and her horse stumbled beneath her, ribs showing. In the wagon behind her, two small children slept curled like pups, wrapped in old grain sacks and wearing clothes too thin for what was coming. She halted at the edge of a cattle fence and slid off the saddle stiffly. Her boots hit the dirt with a thud. She pushed the hair from her face, rubbed her eyes, and raised her voice toward the house near the barn. "Hello," she called. "I need hay. And a blanket if you have one." The door of the house opened, and a man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair pushed back and a rifle in one hand. He did not raise it. He looked at her a long moment, then walked toward her with steady steps. "You rode through that canyon alone?" he asked, his voice low and rough from disuse. "With children." She nodded, arms tight across her ribs. "I left Deer Lodge 3 days ago. No one back there was willing to help. We had to move on." He looked past her at the wagon, at the heap of blankets and the two small sleeping forms. "I am not asking for much," she said. "Just a little feed for the horse. A blanket to keep them warm tonight. We will be gone by morning." The man's jaw worked like he was biting down on something. Then he stepped closer. "What is your name?" he asked. "Junia Sutton," she said. "My children are Jameson and Josie. They are 4 and 6. He looked at her again, at the wear in her shoulders, the set of her mouth, the dirt on her skirt, and the blood on her knuckles from when she had tried to fix the broken wagon wheel herself. "My name is Vance Gallagher," he said. "You are not sleeping in that wagon tonight. I told you I am not asking for," he cut her off gently. "Take my bed." She blinked, startled. He nodded toward the house. "It is warm inside, and I have stew on the stove." She hesitated. "I do not want to impose." "You are not," he said. "Take my bed, Junia. Take my name if you need someone to stand for you. Take me if you will." Her breath hitched. She stared at him, unsure if she had heard him right. But there was no joke in his face. "Noidigans." Just a quiet offer, steadier than the mountains behind him. "I do not even know you," she whispered. "You will," he said simply. "And I will not let you freeze out here." She looked at him a long moment, then looked back at her children. Josie stirred, small fingers clinging to her brother's arm in her sleep. She nodded. Vance walked to the wagon and lifted Josie gently, holding her against his chest like he had done it 100 times. Junia scooped up Jameson, and together they carried the children into the house. Inside, it was warm. The fire crackled and smelled of pine. The stew was thick with beans and elk meat. Vance laid the girl on his bed, pulling a soft wool blanket over her, then helped Jameson out of his worn shoes and tucked him beside his sister. Junia stood near the stove, watching. Her hands were shaking. "You all right?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I am just not used to kindness." He stepped toward her, not too close. "You'll get used to it here." She looked up at him. "Why would you offer something like that? Your name. Yourself." He looked over at the children, then back at her. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." She sat on the edge of a chair, her hands in her lap. "Their father left when Josie was still nursing. Said he was going to buy grain. Never came back." Vance pulled a stool beside the fireplace and sat across from her. "I came out here to be alone," he said after a pause. "Lost my brother in the war. Buried my parents last spring. But sometimes God sends someone down the trail who needs you more than you need the silence." Junia looked at him. "I do not have much left to give." "I am not asking for anything," he said. "You and your children eat, sleep, get strong again. That is enough." But she saw it then, in the way he looked at her like he already cared, like something deep in him had shifted the moment she rode up to the fence. She stood slowly. "You will sleep in here?" He shook his head.
"No."
"I will take the barn." "You should not have to." "I have done it before," he said. "And I will again without complaint." She stepped closer, her eyes soft now. "You meant what you said out there?" He nodded. "Every word." She hesitated, then reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold, but he did not flinch. "Thank you, Vance." He looked at her then, really looked, and something passed between them that was not just gratitude. It was the start of something else, something real. He stood and picked up a blanket from the chest. "Get some rest, Junia." She watched him walk to the door, watched it close gently behind him, and for the first time in years she felt safe. Junia woke to the sound of a woodpecker hammering somewhere near the eaves. The warmth around her felt foreign, like borrowed comfort not meant to last. She sat up slowly, the wool blanket sliding from her shoulders. Josie was still curled beside her, one thumb tucked in her mouth. Jameson had shifted toward the wall in the night, his knees pressed to his chest. Their breathing was slow and even. She rose, careful not to wake them, and moved through the room barefoot. Her skirt was wrinkled from sleep, and her arms ached from days of riding. The fire had burned down low, but the coals still held heat. She found a kettle beside the cook stove and poured water into the basin, washing her face in silence. Outside the window, the frost clung to the grass like a warning, silvering every blade. A figure moved near the barn, splitting kindling with measured strikes. She watched him a moment. Vance hadn't come back inside during the night. She stepped out into the cold, the porch boards rough beneath her feet. "You didn't need to do that," she said, her breath fogging between them. He didn't look up. "Wasn't a burden. You could have at least come in to warm yourself." "I did fine." He set the axe aside, brushing bark from his hands. "You sleep any?" "Some." He nodded once. She crossed her arms. "You still mean what you said yesterday?" He met her gaze then. "I wouldn't have said it if I didn't." She lowered her eyes. "I don't know what kind of woman that makes me, coming here like this. Needing things." "I reckon it makes you brave," he said. "And tired. And still standing." She stepped down off the porch. "I need to help. I can't sit inside that house while you work." "There's chores enough for two," he said. "But you don't owe me labor." "I'm not paying off kindness," she said. "I'm building something. If I stay." He watched her a beat longer, then handed her a bucket. "Pumps on the north side. The hens'll need water." She took it without a word and walked toward the coop. The wind hadn't eased, but the sun was coming up clearer now, burning the mist off the hills. The pump was stiff, but she worked it until water sloshed over the rim, cold enough to sting. By the time she came back, Vance had a fire going in the yard pit. He was boiling something in a blackened pot, and the scent of coffee drifted on the breeze. "You always live this quiet?" she asked, setting the bucket down. "Not always," he said. "Used to be more noise around here. My brother built that barn." He sang while he worked. "Badly." She sat on an upturned crate. "What happened to him?" "Cedar Creek," he said simply. "Virginia." She didn't press. Instead, she took the tin cup he offered and cupped it in both hands. "Thank you," she said. "For not asking questions I'm not ready to answer." "I figure the questions come when you're ready." She took a sip, then looked over at him. "What do you want from this?" He stirred the fire with a length of iron. "I want to come home and hear voices in the house. I want to plant something and know someone else will eat it. I want to fix a roof that keeps more than one person dry." Junia was quiet a moment. "You think we could do that? The four of us?" He met her eyes. "I think we already started." Josie's voice broke the moment, calling from the porch. Junia turned, already halfway to her daughter before the girls stepped fully into view, barefoot and blinking. "I'll get breakfast on," Junia said, scooping the child into her arms. "I've got flour and lard inside," Vance called after her. "Eggs, too." She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The way she held Josie close and carried her into the house said enough. Inside, Jameson was up, rubbing his eyes with his fists. She found the skillet and kindled the stove again, her movements sure even if the space wasn't hers yet. Jameson dragged a stool over and watched her crack eggs into the pan. "When are we leaving?" he asked. She looked down at him. "We're not. Not yet." He didn't answer, just looked toward the door where Vance stood now, leaning in the frame. Junia met his eyes. "Is it all right?" she asked. "If we stay a little longer?" He nodded once. "It's all right." She turned back to the stove, the skillet hissing low. The fire popped, and outside, the wind eased just a little, as if the land itself was settling in. The days shortened quickly in the valley, shadows drawing longer by mid-afternoon. Junia stood beside the clothesline, pinning up the children's washed garments, her sleeves rolled to the elbow and her fingers red from the water's bite. A flock of geese passed overhead, their calls high and mournful. She watched them until they vanished beyond the trees. Vance was mending a gate near the north pasture, his back bent low as he hammered a new crossbar into place. Junia could hear the rhythm of it, even from the yard. It had been like that for nearly a week, now her weaving into his routines, him stepping quietly into hers. No talk of plans, no pressing of answers. Just the hum of shared effort, the hush of something not yet spoken but felt. Jameson came running from the barn with straw in his hair. "Ma, there's a bird's nest in the rafters. Up high." "Don't touch it," she said, turning from the line. "Let it be." "I wasn't going to. I just wanted to tell someone." She nodded, brushing dust from his shirt. "That's good then. You can tell your sister when she wakes." He glanced toward the house and lowered his voice. "She cried again last night. I didn't say anything." Junia touched his cheek. "She misses what she remembers. That's all. She said she wants to stay here." Junia looked toward the pasture where Vance was working. "So, do I." Jameson followed her gaze. "Do you like him?" She crouched to meet his eyes. "I trust him." "That's not what I said." She gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach far. "It's enough for now." He nodded like he understood more than he let on, then ran back toward the coop. Later, while Josie napped and Jameson helped haul firewood, Junia brought a pot of boiled roots out to the lean to where Vance kept his tools. He was sharpening a draw knife, his hands steady along the blade. "You're wasting good food bringing it out here," he said, not looking up. "You're wasting good light sitting in the shade," she said, setting the pot down. He leaned back on the stool. "I was thinking about putting in a second stove. Might make winter easier on you." She sat on a crate opposite him. "You planning on keeping us that long?" His eyes lifted to hers. "I'd like to." She turned the pot lid in her hands. "I used to believe that staying in one place meant getting stuck. But this doesn't feel like stuck." He tilted his head. "What does it feel like?" "Like something could grow here." He wiped the draw knife clean. "There's a place west of the house that catches sunlight all day. You could plant there come spring." "Could. I'll help you fence it." She nodded, her voice quiet. "I want to earn whatever I build here." "You already have." Junia stood slowly, brushing her skirt smooth. "I was thinking of sewing new shirts for the children. If I trade the last of our tobacco at the post, I can get muslin." "I've got bolt stored up," he said. "My mother used to sew. You're welcome to them." She hesitated. "You sure?" "They've been sitting in that chest for 5 years. I figure she'd like to see them used." Junia crossed her arms, watching him. "You don't ask for much." He met her gaze. "Doesn't mean I don't want something." She stepped closer. "Then say it." He stood slowly, the sunlight catching the side of his face. "I want to come home and know you'll be there." She looked down at the dirt, her voice low. I'm still learning what it means to be wanted for who I am, not what I can carry or fix. I don't need fixing, he said. And neither do you. She looked up then, and something in her settled. I've got a needle and strong thread, she said. You bring me those bolts, and I'll stitch this place together. He didn't touch her. He didn't have to. That night, she moved the children into the loft above the main room, spreading quilts and tucking them close. When she came back down, the house was quiet. Vance stood at the hearth, one hand resting on the mantel. I'm not leaving, she said. He turned toward her. Then stay. She crossed the room and took his hand. It was rough and warm, and when his fingers closed around hers, it didn't feel like a promise, it felt like a beginning. Neither of them spoke again that night, but when he pulled the second blanket from the cedar chest and laid it over the bed beside hers, she didn't stop him. They slept in the same room, not pressed together, but close enough that when the wind howled, they both heard it break against the walls and fade. The next morning, he handed her a folded piece of paper. It was clean, the edges pressed flat. My land deed, he said. I want your name on it. Junia didn't touch it right away. You don't have to do that. I know. She looked at him, long and level. Then I will. The first snow came early, softening the fields in pale silence. Vance watched it fall from the porch, his coat collar turned up against the cold. Behind him, the door creaked open. I can mend that hinge, Junia said, brushing flour from her hands. It catches every time. He looked back at her. You shouldn't be climbing ladders. I've done harder things, she said, stepping outside. The dough's rising. I've got time. She stood beside him, arms tucked beneath her shawl. The snow gathered in her hair, but she didn't seem to mind. In the distance, the cattle moved slow through the drift, heads low. How many head do you figure we'll winter through? She asked. If the hay holds, maybe 28. If it doesn't, fewer. You ever lost stock before? He nodded. 3 winters ago. I didn't know enough then. You do now, she said. He glanced at her sidelong. You trust me with that? With more than that, she said, without hesitation. They stood in the hush a moment longer. I sent a letter to the circuit clerk in White Sulphur, he said. Asked what's needed to amend a land title. She turned toward him, surprised. They'll want you to sign, he added. In person. She studied his face. You think folks there will question it? Maybe. But they'll file it just the same. She nodded. Then we'll ride in, once the pass clears. He didn't answer right away, his eyes still on the snow-covered hills. I never expected anyone to stay. I never expected to want to, she said. That night, she worked by lamplight, cutting cloth into narrow shapes and piecing them together at the table. Vance sat nearby, carving a new yoke for the ox sled, his hands steady over the cedar. Jameson lay on the rug with a pencil stub, drawing a crooked house with smoke curling from its chimney. Josie leaned against Junia's hip, her eyes heavy with sleep. Did you always sew? Vance asked, not looking up from his work. I learned in Kansas. My aunt kept a dress shop in Emporia. She let me stay on after my mother passed. You liked it? I liked the order of it. Clean lines, steady seams. You can't rush the stitching or it shows. He sanded the edge of the yoke. You ever think of opening a shop yourself? She paused, surprised by the question. Not since before the children were born. You still could. Here. She gave a soft laugh. I don't think there's much call for fine dresses in this valley. Not yet, he said. But folks settle where there's steadiness. You've got the hands for it. She looked at him then, at the quiet certainty in his face. You think there's room for that kind of life here? I think there's room for any life you want to build. She reached over and touched his wrist, fingers brushing the edge of the knife handle. He stilled beneath her touch. I don't know what to call what we're building. You don't have to name it yet, he said. Just keep building. The next morning, Junia rose before dawn and packed a basket with bread and dried apple slices. She wrapped each child in extra quilts and kissed their hair. Then she stepped into her boots and tied her scarf tight. Vance was already saddling the mare. "You sure you want to ride to the South Ridge alone?" he asked. "That's near a full day's round." "I need the time," she said. "I want to see the land. Know what's beyond the fence line." He looked at her a moment. "Take the rifle." She nodded, strapping it behind the saddle. He handed her a folded oilskin. "If the weather turns, use this." She mounted without help, adjusting the reins with practiced ease. "Will you be all right with the children?" she asked. He gave a small smile. "I won't let them burn the house down." She leaned forward, her voice low. "I mean it, Vance." "If something happens, nothing will," he said. "But if it does, I'll find you." She studied him, then turned the mare toward the trail. The ride out was quiet, the snow thinning as she rode higher into the hills. She passed a line of bare cottonwoods, their branches shivering in the wind. At the crest of the ridge, she dismounted and stood still, the valley opening wide below. She could see the roof of the house, smoke rising from the chimney. The pasture fence curved like a steady hand holding the land in place. She stayed there a long time, listening to the hush before the sun broke through. When she returned near dusk, the children were asleep near the fire, and Vance was stirring stew with one hand, a book open in the other. "I didn't know you read," she said, unwrapping her scarf. He looked up. "Only when there's quiet enough for it." "Find anything worth remembering?" He closed the book. One line stuck. "Which?" He met her eyes. "To love something is to give it shelter." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "Then I reckon I've found the right place." He reached out and took her hand, drawing her palm to his chest. "You've got shelter here," he said, "and every day after." She didn't answer, but when she leaned into him, he wrapped his arms around her, and the rest of the world fell still. The snow held through November, but the sky stayed clear, and the roads to White Sulphur remained passable. They left before sunrise, leaving Jameson and Josie with May Red Elk, who lived 3 miles east and had raised 7 of her own. Vance had built her a new porch the summer before. She called it Even Now. Junia rode astride beside him, her coat belted tight and her hands gloved in wool she'd stitched herself. Vance had packed bread and smoked venison, and they ate in the saddle beneath the pale light of morning. Neither rushed the journey. The silence between them was no longer unfamiliar. It hung easy, like breath between words. White Sulphur Springs sat quiet, a few wagons creaking along the main road, smoke curling from every chimney. They tied their horses behind the justice office. Vance held the door open for her without a word. Inside, the clerk was young, with wire spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He thumbed through the forms quickly, handing them over with a nod. "You'll both need to sign here. And here." Junia read each line carefully before she took the pen. Her hand didn't shake. Vance signed beside her. The clerk sealed the documents with wax and pressed the county stamp. "There," he said. "It's yours now. Shared by law." Outside, Vance helped her down the steps. The light caught in her hair, and for a moment, he didn't move. She looked up at him. "You all right?" He nodded. "Just thinking how you look standing here. Like you belong." "I do," she said. "We all do." They rode home slow, stopping once by the river where the ice had begun to form in quiet patches along the banks. Junia stepped down and walked to the edge. "My mother used to tell me water remembers things," she said. "Said it carries what we lose." Vance joined her, his breath fogging beside hers. "What have you lost that you wanted to carry?" "I've already let most of it go." She turned toward him and reached up, adjusting the scarf at his collar. Her hand lingered. "I want to marry you, Vance. Not for land. Not for safety. Because I want to wake beside you when spring comes." His eyes didn't leave hers. "You sure?" I've been sure since the day I saw you carry Josie like she was already yours. He lifted her hand slowly, pressing it to his chest. Then let's do it right, he said. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Before the year turns. They married on the 28th of December in the small church outside the basin. May Red Elk braided Junia's hair and wrapped her in a shawl lined with elk hide. Jameson stood beside Vance in a coat cut down from one of his own. Josie scattered pine boughs across the aisle as the preacher read the vows. Afterward, they walked back to the house together, the children racing ahead in the snow. Junia's hand stayed tucked in Vance's arm the whole way. That night, after the children had fallen asleep curled near the fire, Junia stood in the doorway of the bedroom, the lamp casting a soft glow across the floorboards. Vance sat at the edge of the bed, unbuttoning his cuffs. He stopped when he saw her watching. "You coming in?" he asked. She stepped forward, her voice quiet. "You built this room for yourself. I built it for what I thought I'd never have." She came to stand in front of him, taking his hand in hers. "Now you do." They undressed without hurry, moving around each other with familiarity born not of months, but of quiet trust. They lay beneath the wool quilt, her head tucked against his chest, his arm around her waist. In the stillness, Vance pressed his lips to her forehead. "Nothing's ever felt like this." She answered by threading her fingers through his. "This is home." The winter passed, each day marked by small things, the children's laughter echoing off the barn walls, the steady rhythm of firewood splitting, the scent of broth simmering on the stove. By spring, Junia's garden took root. Vance built her a fence of cedar rails, and Jameson helped plant onions while Josie chased chickens through the rows. Junia stood at the gate one afternoon, her hand resting on her stomach, her eyes soft. Vance came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her middle. "You knew before I did," she said. "I felt it," he admitted. "Same way I knew you'd stay." She leaned back into him. "We're not running anymore."
"No," he said.
"We're growing." The weeks turned gentle. The house filled with the sounds of living spoon taps against bowls, creaking floorboards, the low hum of lullabies sung under breath. Junia sewed a dress from the muslin Vance had given her, not for anyone else, just for herself. She wore it in the evenings, when the air was warm and the porch held the last of the sun. One night, they rocked side by side on the porch bench, her head resting against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd get this," she whispered. He kissed her hair. "You earned every piece of it."
And she had.
Together, they built a life that healed what had come before. Not by forgetting, but by planting something stronger in its place. The past remained, but it no longer carried weight. What mattered now was the house that stood firm against the wind, the hands they held each morning, and the quiet promise between them that whatever came next, they'd face it side by side. They lived long, and they lived well, and they never once let go of each other.